Hi, my name is Ruby, and this is my assessment 2 for literacy and numeracy, and it's a reflective response to my literacy and numeracy test that I took not too long ago. So I just want to start off by explaining the importance of literacy and numeracy, the general capabilities that are essential for students to access learning, and they're explicitly defined in the Australian curriculum. So they transcend across the curriculum, and teachers must work towards assisting students developing these skills and building and improving their skills. So literacy and numeracy in the curriculum has evolved over time and has become a very important part of the Australian curriculum. According to Gorris and Hunter 2018, it's very important that teachers are aware of these changes in the 21st century. Obviously, with the change of technology, the curriculum has had to mould with these changes in order for students to obtain skills that are necessary for them to become functioning members of society in the future. So modes of pedagogy have changed with this as well. So there's a national standard. There's a land height, which is what university students take when they're entering a career of education. So the students must finish in the top 30%. And then, of course, we've got the NAPLAN for ages years 3, 5, 7, and 9. So this is done annually. But of course, a constant informal and formal testing is necessary throughout the year in the classroom. And I believe this is done through building positive relationships with students, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So in terms of my results, I got 260 out of 320, which is about 81%. And I finished in about half an hour. So the numeracy part was tough for me. Fractions aren't my strong point, and having done this regularly since high school, haven't done this regularly since high school, it took me the longest. So some of the questions were quite wordy, and admittedly, I didn't really read them properly. And this would probably explain my other results as well later on in the literacy part. So for my land height in numeracy, I got above average for my mark, and it doesn't really correlate with what I got in this one. So, but surprisingly, numeracy wasn't the area that I did worst in. So I would like to think that literacy is my strong point, as I endeavour to be a wonderful English teacher. I got well above standard for my land height result for literacy, but the questions on this test were tricky. So some of them had a couple of answers that could have been correct instead of having one obvious answer and a couple of answers that were obviously correct. So there was no means of kind of eliminating those ones. So that threw me off a little bit. And there were questions that I actually still think I got right, which is a little bit weird. So admittedly, I was a little bit frustrated. So when I reflected on why I felt this way, it kind of made me think of how students must feel when they take these tests. I think painting all students with the same brush can be problematic. I think students may be thinking and using their problem-solving skills, using their literacy and numeracy skills, but because they got the answer wrong, their work isn't counted at all, and this would be very discouraging, I think. So I felt like the test was overwhelming at the time because I wasn't prepared. I completed the land height back in August, but I certainly feel like this test was a lot harder. And this could have been for a number of reasons. So I was under quite a bit of stress at the time. I had 4 assignments due. I was studying late nights, work, other commitments. So I think it's fair to say that life can get in the way sometimes. And admittedly, I don't think I've ever really thought about this properly before. So students take these literacy and numeracy tests every 2 years or so. But what if they're having a bad day? Why must this one test be the way that we measure our students' capabilities nationally? These are valid questions, and because literacy and numeracy in the curriculum has adapted so much over the years, it's probably fair to say that our testing might need to change as well. I was also underprepared because I didn't even have a calculator with me. I was under the impression that, like the land height, you have a calculator on screen. And I didn't think I could answer these questions by hand. I assumed that I needed a calculator. So I wasted time getting my phone out, getting an app up. And this made me think of how reliant I am on technology. This could be problematic. In a maths class, I think I'm a numerate person with a calculator. But what is numeracy? We know numeracy isn't limited to a maths class. It transcends across English, science, history, etc. To be critical of this specific test, the questions were very much in the form of a formal maths test. And in the land type, there is a part where a calculator is not allowed to be used. So there are other numeracy skills that are required for that part of the test. My performance in this test and also throughout this unit has told me that I need to be knowledgeable of and have great literacy and numeracy skills in order to be a good educator. I believe that the only way I can teach and help students develop these capabilities is if I have strong skills. Although I performed well in the Landtite, I can reflect now after completing this unit that the Landtite is one test, one set of questions that I studied for at the time that I quite possibly got wrong this time. So there's a clear difference between developing literacy and numeracy skills and just studying for specific topics on a test. Moving forward into my discipline area of English, and as an educator in general, I believe there are a number of ways I can enhance student development of literacy and numeracy by responding to my reflections on this test. So as I previously mentioned, I ran into a number of difficulties during this test, but I strongly believe that there are ways to prevent these from occurring. I suppose the most important prevention strategy would be to plan properly. So I was underprepared both mentally and physically. I didn't have the right equipment with me, and it is vital to plan effectively to accommodate the students that struggle with literacy and numeracy, and as well as students that are at the normal level of development as well. Studying the ways in which teachers can plan in these areas has been an enlightening learning curve for me in this particular unit, as I think that I've created a little bit of a toolbox to take forward in my career. So I've learned that lesson planning is essential. It's important to have a flexible strategy to take into the class. And planning also includes individual learning plans for students, so taking the time to get to know your students, that I'll get to a little bit later. So Rubenstein suggested that pre-assessment is vital as well, and this is so that teachers can gain an understanding as to what kind of support that the students may need. So building these foundations is evidently very important. So Sullivan's principles of embedding literacy and numeracy into the curriculum in terms of planning, I feel, are very useful. Firstly, articulating goals allows students to identify what they are learning. During placement, I became familiar with providing a learning intention and success criteria to the students before conducting my lesson. And this was beneficial as it set out clear goals each lesson for the students, and they were aware of what was expected of them as well. Sullivan also encourages differentiation, so through planning support of students who need it and arranging extra challenges for students that are at the expected level of understanding. And finally, he suggests that lessons are structured in a way that fosters communication between students in group situations, as well as student-teacher communication. Sullivan suggests encouraging student reflection and reporting can be utilised as a learning opportunity for the teacher as well as the student. In terms of group situations as well, I think this is reflecting Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, so putting students in a situation where they're with other students that are at or above the level of development as well, just to allow them to increase into that next zone of development. So as I analysed Sullivan's work, I found myself making direct connections to the POLTs, specifically 1.4. Each student experiences success through structured support, the valuing of effort, and the recognition of their work. I think that effective planning shows value and support of a student's development and would include things like determining students' differing abilities and providing support when needed, acknowledging students' progress and scaffolding the learning to maximise success, recognising and celebrating the achievements of all students, assessing student work against prior achievements rather than other students' work, and providing students with realistic but challenging goals that recognise and recognising the effort that they put towards achieving these goals. As I reflect on the difficulties I had, I can only imagine what these are like for students with learning difficulties and disabilities. So according to Tomlinson and Strickland, it's really important to be able to modify the content in order for each student to have an equal opportunity to learn. During my placement, I had come into contact with a student in Year 7 who was at a Year 3 reading level. To combat this, my mentor teacher had given him the audiobook of the prescribed text so that he could access it and take part in classroom activities. In terms of the POLTs, his teacher displayed structured support by valuing his effort and recognising achievements of the student. The student's achievements were not compared with others in the class, but were assessed on his previous achievements. The student did not feel left out of discussion, and the audio book allowed him to stay on task. I think essentially it comes down to being a thoughtful and caring professional, taking the time to get to know your students. Once again, this correlates with the POLTs. 1.1, the teacher builds positive relationships through knowing and valuing each student. This is a great way to find out what makes them tick. And also as a mode of informal testing, because if you know the student well, you're able to track their progress. It gives the opportunity for an inquiry-based classroom where students are able to explore topics that are of interest to them, allowing them to use their literacy and numeracy skills in an informal way. And this is according to Alberta 2004. I think that this will be challenging, having a class of 25 kids times however many classes I'll have that all have individual needs. It will be overwhelming at first, I think, but I believe through constant reflection like this, throughout my degree, comparing placements and real life experiences, and taking these reflection skills forward in my career, I can become the educator that I'd like to be.